Hello, everybody. In this episode, we're going to talk about triple digit subtraction with borrowing. If you've seen my previous video, you've watched double digit subtraction with borrowing. Now, triple digit subtraction with borrowing is very, very similar to the double digit one. However, there are 3 columns. Let's dive straight into the examples so that you understand what I'm saying. So you have, for example, 429 minus 272. All right. Just like any other episode, I always divide a number into its place value columns. So for example, on the very right, you've got the units column, and then in the middle, you've got the tens. And on the very left-hand side, you've got over here the hundreds. All right. So we know that we have to begin with the units. Then we move on to the tens. And then we move on to the hundreds. So let's begin. So for example, you have 9 minus 2. What does that give me? That gives me a 7. Okay, so we move on to the tens. But this time we have 2 minus 7. Now this looks very tricky because 7 is bigger than 2. But no worries, we can borrow. How do we borrow? So we borrow, because we are borrowing into the tens, we have to borrow from the hundreds. Okay? So you borrow into the hundreds and you make this 1. Okay? So we are left with 3 on this side. So this answer becomes a 12 here. Okay? So 12 tens minus 7 tens. That's what we're looking at. 12 tens actually is 120, but we don't look at it as 120 when we subtract. We look at it as 12 tens minus 7 tens, okay? So just simply look at 12 minus 7 in the 10 section. So 12 minus 7 gives me a 5. And then we go on to the hundred section where we do 3 hundreds minus 2 hundreds, which gives me a 1. So our final answer here is 157. Okay, so 100 gives me 100, 5 tens gives me 50, and 7 units gives me 7. So 157. All right. So let's try and do some more so that this gets clearer for you. Okay, so the next question that we will look into is 683 minus 369. So again, we look into the units, tens, and hundreds. Okay, so let's look into this. So we start with the unit section first. Now 3 minus 9. Obviously 9 is too big to subtract from 3, so we have to do some borrowing. So we're going to borrow a 1 from the 8 over here, and this is left with 7. Okay, so let's try. 13 minus 9 gives me a 4. And now we're left with 7 over here. Okay, so let's look. 7 minus 6 gives me a 1. Very possible to do. Okay, we don't need to borrow over here. Okay, and let's go back to the hundreds. 6 minus 3. Is that possible? Oh yes, that's possible, and we don't have to borrow. So our final answer here is 314. So So 3 hundreds, 110, and 4 units, which gives me 314. All right? Now, let's try and do another one where I'll give you some time to work on it to see if you've got these concepts clear. So let's practice with the equation that goes like this. 822 minus 366. Okay, we're going to divide this into the units, tens, and the hundreds section. Okay, so I'm going to give you about 10 seconds to try and do this. Okay, let's try. Okay, so we're going to look at the unit section first. 2 minus 6, is that possible? I don't think so, because 6 over here is too big to subtract from the 2. So obviously we're going to borrow. So we're going to borrow 1 from the 2 here. And so over here we're left with only 1 because we borrowed 1. So 12 minus 6 gives me a 6. And now I'm going to move on to the tens. So 1 minus 6, is that possible? Oh no, because 6 is too big to subtract from 1. So what do we do now? We have to borrow over here too. So let's go on to borrow 1 from the 8 over here, and this gives me 11. And then because I've borrowed 1, I'm left with 8 minus 1, which gives me a 7 here. So let's begin. 11 minus 6 gives me a 5. And then now we move on to the hundreds. Now that we finished the tens, we move on to the hundreds. 7 minus 3 gives me a 4. So my final answer is 456. I hope these concepts are clear. For more questions, please comment on the comment section and I shall get back to you. Thank you.